Love is the enemy of duty. My name is Jared, and this is Mellow Mentoring. Thank you to everyone who's been liking, commenting, subscribing. It's been great to have you on board. I couldn't do it without you. And if you enjoy videos about mental health, psychology, dating, relationships, supplements, etc., please do subscribe. But on to today's video. Love is the enemy of duty. I heard this in a Game of Thrones episode. The Grand Maester at the Wall said it to Jon Snow, because the Grand Maester was a wise man. At the Wall, there were no women. And what you have there is a group of very focused and determined men. They might not like their circumstances there, but there are no female distractions. Because the Grand Maester knew not very many men are capable of truly falling head over heels in love and staying focused on their mission and purpose. In my own life, I have found it very difficult to remain emotionally independent while being with a woman I really loved or liked, etc. I find it, and this is all my own fault, of course, it's my own responsibility to stay on my course, to stay on my path, to stay focused on my mission and purpose, and to put the boundaries in place so that I don't let a female distract me from what I need to do. But all too often what happens to men is they start dating, and then maybe a woman starts asking more and more of their time, and you start doing more and more stuff with her, and then people get distracted, and they slowly but surely begin to drop things in their own life in favor of a woman. And in society and in the movies, media, this has been a pretty standard thing. This is what they convey. It's just what happens to men when they get married and have a family, etc. They give up many other things, and they put it under the guise of growing up. Now, if a guy, I'm not sure what I feel like about marriage in this day and age. I think it's a very risky proposition for men, financially speaking, and especially since when you look at the numbers, I mean, over 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's a pretty risky endeavor. Like if you said to someone, you can jump out of this plane, but there's a 50% chance that this parachute won't open, are you still going to jump out of the plane? Probably not. And I think it is possible when two people fit really well together, both partners can remain on their hustle and still be focused on their own life. But I think what happens is a lot of people just aren't emotionally healthy enough and don't have the boundaries to be able to do that. So they'll get into these relationships, and a lot of times the relationships will be centered on some form of toxicity, and there's a form of emotional addiction that gives people the roller coaster rides of emotions, and it distracts them. It sways them off course. And I think ultimately, this is the man's fault. The man's got to prevent this from happening. And if he sees this happening within himself, he has to ask himself a question. Is this woman worth it? Or is there something I need to be doing differently to make sure this doesn't happen? And I'm not against anyone going on a long-term relationship, an LTR, or dating, but I have found in my own life it's essential to not become emotionally dependent on another person. I have to keep my emotions to myself. I have to remain emotionally independent. And this is the part a lot of women aren't going to like, but a man who remains emotionally independent, he might not have those mushy-gushy, head over heels in love feelings, but he can still do the actions of love. He can still do the take care of her. He can still put food on the table. He can still go through all the motions without allowing himself to be sucked in to that emotional feeling. And believe it or not, women don't like men when men fall off their emotional independence and then become too into them. Women might not think that's the case, but that's exactly what's happening. in a lot of these failed relationships. The guy gets off center, he starts pursuing too much, texting too much, loses his emotional center, his strength, and stops growing in his own life. So a man, he might not be head over heels in love with a woman, but that doesn't mean he couldn't still be a stable partner. And in fact, I could argue a man, when he isn't head over heels in love, will actually be a better partner than a man who is. Because a man who is head over heels in love, he might fall off. And he'll start thinking more emotionally. Start thinking more with his heart than his head. But I think a good man knows he's got to think with his head more. And not the small one either. He's got to think with the big head. So that things remain on course. A woman wants a man to be masculine. And a woman wants to be able to trust the dude to know he's going in the right direction. To know that they can trust where he is going. They trust in his leadership abilities. That he knows what to do. And a man who is emotionally head over heels in love, perhaps emotionally dependent, etc., is less likely to be able to do the right things. Emotions and the love and the up and down roller coaster ride that a lot of love relationships are going to sway him. And again, in a very emotionally healthy relationship, these things just don't happen. But let's face it, for most relationships, they are not very emotionally healthy. And there's going to be some toxicity. Why? Because no one's perfect. And so this is why the Grand Maester's line to Jon Snow, love is the enemy of duty, I think that is what he is conceding. He's conceding that most relationships are not emotionally healthy. One, because marriages end in divorce more than 50% of the time. And two, there's probably many unhealthy marriages that are just not ending in divorce. And they stick together for whatever reason. Maybe the kids, or they're just kind of comfortable in their same routine. The comfortable pain is a little more comfortable than the unfamiliar newness of leaving. So this is the point. He knew that love can be the enemy of duty. And for a man, I think this means whether you have a partner or not, a wife or not, we must remain emotionally centered. Because I know for me, when I am not emotionally centered, I mess up. I do stupid things. And I am no longer as trustworthy as I was before. And my relationships prove it. Whenever I've fallen off course, it has not gone well. But when I'm a little more guarded, I keep my boundaries, I make sure I'm always okay with my own life single. And I don't need to be getting any happiness from a partner. If I can make sure all of those check boxes or those marks are checked, things can be good. And I can be the leader and the man that I'm supposed to be. This is why love, and I think Grand Maester means unhealthy love, is the enemy of duty. If we can love healthily, more power to us. And I think when two people are on a good spot, emotionally independent together, they can actually become interdependent. They can create more together than they could separately. I think, unfortunately, most relationships do not fit that category, and they fit the becoming emotionally dependent category, where they actually create less together than they do individually. And I'd say to men out there, until you find someone that you can create more together with than you could individually, you should not be with her. And for me, in most cases, it's been that way, where I allow myself to get messed up. And I lose my way. I lose my direction. And this is weak, though. I fully admit this. This is weak behavior on my part. It means my boundaries were not strong enough. It means I was not radically respecting myself enough. I take 100% ownership for those things. And it's my fault. So I must remain emotionally independent. I must have strong boundaries. I must continue on my mission and purpose. And be okay, whether I have a partner or not. So tell me out there, do you agree with this? Do you agree love is the enemy of duty? What do you think the Grand Maester from Game of Thrones meant? I'll be very curious to hear your thoughts. So with that, have a good one.